All right, well, hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining our webinar today. I expect that we'll probably have a few more people joining us before too long. This is a topic that I often get lots of questions about from libraries who are trying to figure out how they can start a Friends organization that can fundraise on the library's behalf because their library's facing budget issues, or perhaps they hope to build a new building, so they are interested in starting like a capital campaign. And they realize that they really need an organization outside of the library that can do all of that fundraising and advocacy work and reach out to the community in ways that they can't. So they really need a 501c3 nonprofit to do that work. So I'm really happy today. We have, hopefully we'll have 4 presenters joining us. They are panelists who will be joining us, and that is Carol Race. She's not here right now, but she will be shortly. She is the president from the Juneau Public Library's Friends of the Library. We have Mary Rasmussen. She's the president of the Anchorage Public Library's Friends of the Library, and Mary Lou Burton. She is a board member of the Friends of the Homer Public Library. So thank you, ladies, for joining us. We really are looking forward to hearing from you and learning from your experience participating in a Friends of the Library organization. Okay. Here we go. I have, at the end of this webinar, I have all of the panelists' contact information for their Friends organization, so if you want to reach out to them, you can do that as well. So this webinar is going to be set up kind of in 2 parts. And the first part, I'm going to walk you through the process of creating a Friends of the Library. We're going to talk about why you should do so and how you can build in some like guardrails to your Friends of the organization so it doesn't go rogue, right? Nobody wants to have a rogue Friends of the Library. You really want your Friends of the Library organization to work in tandem with your library, so you both are working towards the same goals. And the second part is going to be our panelists, and they're each going to have like 5-6 minutes to talk about their organization, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. Okay? All right. So Friends, like I mentioned earlier, Friends organizations are often created out of a specific need. And I know that right now, with the state of the budget across our state and because of COVID's impact on our economies, that a lot of communities are going to be facing budgetary issues moving forward. So if you don't have a Friends of the Library organization, this may be the perfect time to create one. So Friends of organizations can be created out of a specific need. So again, there could be chronic underfunding. A lot of libraries simply never receive the level of support that they really need to meet all of the needs of their community, their collection needs and the programming needs of their community. So as a nonprofit tax-exempt organization, and I'm going to go ahead and do this now. We've got a lot more people joining now. I'm going to turn my video off. Hopefully I am. Okay. Maybe I'm not. Who knows? It's a new thing. Oh, Barbara, yay, you're here.
Hi.
You. Okay, great. So Barbara Berg, she's also another one of our panelists, and we're really happy to have her on here. So Barbara, I was just talking about how as a nonprofit tax-exempt organization, Friends are primarily involved in the fundraising, and the money that they raise goes directly to the public library to expand its services and resources. And generally, Friends organizations, they might need to keep like maybe 20% of the money that they earn just to run their own organization, but typically they're given like 80% of it back to the library. And in doing so, that's kind of one of the reasons people are so happy to support them, is they know that the money that they're giving the Friends is going to go right back into the library, and it's going to show up in some tangible way, either in new materials, new resources, or new programming. Friends support summer reading programs. They do special events throughout the year, and it's not like they generally just fundraise once a year. they're often fundraising throughout the year. There's membership drives, there may be book sales, there may be some Friends organizations have storefronts such as Juno, and I hope that Carol or Barbara will be able to talk about their amazing bookstore. But if you've ever been to the Seattle downtown library, they have that wonderful store right there on when you first walk into the library, and it's so fantastic. It has all kinds of wonderful book-related materials and fun little tchotchkes, I guess you'd say, that they sell, and that money goes to support their Friends program. Friends, as 501c3s, they also can write grants, and they can also be involved in building relationships with donors. So I know in Anchorage, you have a library foundation, and then you have a Friends of the Library. So they're really, both of them are out there garnering support for the library, but in different ways. So Friends of the Library, they are looking for broad public support, whereas foundations generally are more narrow. Friends are also involved in recruiting library volunteers, in advocacy, and supporting library programs, and conducting library awareness campaigns. So they really, it's not just the financial support, it's so much more. So when I was starting to look for materials for this webinar, the first place I went to was United for Libraries, and they have really a fantastic toolkit created by Sally Gardner-Reed, and it just walks you through the process. And I referred to it a lot in this webinar, and I used it a lot when I kind of set up the webinar. If you do an author search in the Alaska Library Catalog on Sally Gardner-Reed, you'll see that she's written books on Friends, on starting Friends, for like multiple books, multiple titles. And her most recent one is, let me see if you can see it here. It's The Good, the Great, and the Unfriendly, a librarian's guide to working with Friends group. So, you know, a lot of this is trying to ensure that when you set up your Friends, that you do it in such a way that you really do work with the library, because often, not often, but occasionally, Friends groups can just go rogue, is the word that she uses here. And I actually have experience working in a library where there was a lot of animosity between the library director and the Friends group. And instead of working together, there was just a lot of friction and unhappiness. And so if you can avoid that at all costs, I would ensure that you do that. So really, you really should start by looking at this toolkit. It's great, it's very helpful, very easy to read, has lots of great information. The other resources that you probably want to look at is to go to the 4Acre group. So if you're not familiar with 4Acre, the 4Acre group is a 501c3 organization in Alaska, and their mission really is to strengthen nonprofits in our state. And they're a fabulous organization. They do fantastic trainings like board training, not necessarily library board training, but great board training and things like that. And they've developed 2 free resources that you really probably want to take a look at. The first one is Starting a Nonprofit, and read this first. And it outlines the many points that you may not have considered when you're thinking, oh, I'm going to start a Friends group. It's going to be great. We're going to go out there and start raising funds and everything. And it's like, whoa, take a step back. Think about what it is that you're actually doing. And that resource starts by saying, you know, a nonprofit is kind of like starting a business. You know, you got to really think about, you know, do you have what it takes to get the nonprofit off the ground? What are you hoping to achieve? You know, who's going to benefit from it? So there's a series of questions that they kind of make you think about what it is you're trying to achieve, and then think about the structure and the time commitment and everything. The other one is Guidelines for Nonprofit Bylaws, which is just a simple 2-page template with a description of various bylaw sections. So it doesn't have all of the bylaw sections, but it has quite a few of them. So those are some great resources to get started. So the second thing that you want to do, let me take a step back. So as I mentioned, Friends of the Library are 501c3 organizations, nonprofit tax exempt, with officers and bylaws. And so as a separate nonprofit organization, the Friends go out and they raise funds, and they get to decide how the money is spent. And it's this independence that can occasionally cause friction with the library board and library staff if the priorities of the Friends group aren't aligned with the library's strategic plan. So one of the examples that I was reading that illustrated this point, often Friends groups are very interested in supporting early literacy. So they want, because libraries and literacy are really important, we have to support early literacy programs in our library. Well, oftentimes a library the early literacy component can be supported very well by the municipality. They may think that that's another important issue that the library needs to do, and they may be providing the library with enough money to do that, to meet that part of their mission. Whereas the city may not think it's that important to provide adult programming. So the point is that you don't want the Friends to be supporting early literacy and the city to be supporting early literacy and nobody to be supporting teen programming or adult programming. Other parts of the library's mission are going unfunded. So that's why it's really important for the library and the Friends to actually sit down and say, okay, what is your purpose? How are you going to support us? And that can be done, and how is the library going to support you? And that can be done by coming up with a memorandum of understanding. So when you're creating your Friends group, there's two things you can do to ensure that the Friends of the library and the library board are working well together. And the first is this memorandum of understanding. And you can find an example of one in that library toolkit. And it kind of lists the things. So the example that they provide has, it lists 6 things that the library agrees to do and 6 things that the Friends agree to do. So for one of the examples is the library agrees to provide the Friends with space in the library for book storage, sorting, book tables, and so on. And then the Friends agree that the library administration has the final say in accepting or declining any or all gifts made to the library. Now, I can tell you from my experience working in a public library that space for books often can become contentious, right? So it can cause a lot. It can cause a lot of grief if there's only one storage room and it just becomes full of boxes of dusty, moldy books, and you go in there and you're trying to do a children's program and you just can't do it because of all the books. It can become a real area of contention. So you need to come up with these memorandum of understandings, and then periodically probably go back and make sure that if you have a new director or a new president of the board or whatever, that periodically you go back and make sure that that's still working for everybody. So the second thing that you want to do is to ensure that communication channels exist. And you can do that by designating a library board member who will serve as a liaison to the Friends of the library group. And this person serves, he's as that communication channel. Ideally, the library director will be attending the Friends of the Library's meetings, and there will be communication between the director, the Friends, and the library board. Now, one of the ways that you know that your Friends group is going rogue is when they start holding meetings and they don't invite you. They don't invite the library director. Okay, that's not a good sign. So you want to make sure that someone from that library is at that meeting. It's not uncommon for the roles of the library board members and the Friends board to get confused because oftentimes you have the same people in those roles. You have people who care about the library. So maybe they start on the Friends board and then they go onto the library board or vice versa. So sometimes it's really important to have those things spelled out. When I'm on the board, this is what I'm doing, and when I'm on the Friends, this is what I'm doing. So that toolkit, actually, I'm sorry, not the toolkit, there is a fact sheet. United for Library has created fact sheet number 10 for Friends and Foundations that spells out the roles of the Friends board. And it's a really helpful tool. I took some of this languages from that. Okay, so let's get into the fun part. So you want to create your group. So the first thing you're going to want to do is Reach out to other members of Friends boards. You know, just call them up on the phone like I did, say, hey, can you share information about what you guys do and how you do it? How were you guys formed? You know, just reach out to them and get firsthand information from people who are involved in Friends of the Libraries. Reach out to the United for Libraries Association of Library Trustees, Advocates, and Friends Foundation. It's a division of the American Library Association, and you can just type in United for Libraries and it'll take you there. They have a lot of free sources of information, and they also do trainings throughout the year. Then you'll want to recruit some members to serve on your steering committee, and this steering committee is going to be your initial leadership, and they're going to be you're looking for people who are really well connected in the community, good organizational skills, willing to put in the time and effort. So you're looking for worker bees, right? People who get things done. They don't even necessarily have to be current library supporters because you're going to turn them into one. But they do need to be kind of those go-getters. So you're really looking for an enthusiastic, well-connected group of people, people who can attract others. And get them excited about your cause. You're going to set up your initial meeting, and at that meeting, you're going to want to talk about what is the purpose of our organization, and what are we trying to do, and how are we going to do it. And that's really critical. You need to actually look at what the library's mission is and see where you guys would fit in within the library's mission. Now, as I was reading information about Friends of the Library, a lot of them talked about it's really important when the library is doing a strategic plan to include members of the include members of the Friends of the Library in that strategic planning so that they can be part of that process and kind of gets baked into them. So that's that first part. We talked about MOU. Okay, the organizational bylaws. So I'm going to go to the next slide here. So Friends Group generally have two documents that govern them, the bylaws and the Constitution. And so in Sandy Dolnick's book, The Essential Friends of Library, Fast Facts, Forms, and Tips, she differentiates the two documents this way. Of the two, the bylaws are more specific. So while the Constitution might mention a board of directors, the bylaws will specify a board of no less than 10 members or no more than 20. The Constitution will say that officers will govern the organization, and the bylaws will state the officers are a president, a vice president, secretary, and treasurer, and so on. If you wish to incorporate your Friends Group as a 501c3 tax-exempt nonprofit, you will need to have established organizing documents such as the Constitution and bylaws before the group can become a legal entity, and you will definitely need to have a mission statement. Again, that goes back to what your purpose is as an organization. So there's an example here on the slide. You guys can go and look and see an example of a Constitution and the bylaws, and these are, I can't see because my recorder's in the way. Here we go. From the Allen Public Library. We talked about that communication channel, and so in the bylaws, it's really recommended that you put on here language such as this. You know, a member of the executive board shall attend each library board meeting on a rotating basis. They shall blah 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 represent the Friends, keep the library board apprised of the activities of the Friends, and report to the Friends executive. So some kind of language that really formalizes that communication. So, okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay. So when setting up your dues, membership dues, you may want to have like a graduated level of membership so that you can really invite people from all parts of your community can participate in some way in your organization. And, you know, you might have this is an example from Homer. So you have your individual, the family, like families on here twice. a book lover is a little bit more, a bibliophile, a best friend, a business membership. Some friends organizations have like lifetime memberships as well, just so that, you know, because people want to support you, and maybe one year they can support you as an individual, the next year they're feeling a little more flush, they can support you as a bibliophile. So that's just important. And you really, when you start out, you may want to establish a founder's membership, which would be probably more, but we really would encourage members to make a significant contribution to the organization and kind of get it off the ground. Okay, so this is going to be about the 501c3. So it really is beneficial to have your friends group be a 501c3 nonprofit. Because as a 501c3, it does not have to pay federal or state corporate taxes or state sales taxes. So there's really, it's kind of like, you're kind of doing two things at once. The first step is to become incorporated at the state level as a nonprofit. So once your organization has come up with your constitution and bylaws and your mission statement, you'll want to file your Articles of Incorporation domestic nonprofit corporation form with the State of Alaska Department of Community and Economic Development Division of Banking, Securities, and Corporations. So you'll go to this website that I have on here, and you'll look for forms. You'll go to corporations and then look for forms, and it's down towards left-hand side towards the bottom. There's a series of forms, and you're going to be looking for the nonprofit one. Wait a second. Find my notes here. Domestic nonprofit. And I have actually provided a link to that form on one of the last slides, one of the source slides. So you can look at that form and see what information is in it. And so the first part of it is like, you know, the name of your organization and such. And then it's kind of like set up like articles of incorporation, I don't have an example of it here with me. Hold on a sec. Well, anyway, I'm not going to go there. You guys can check it out. So the state of Alaska does not provide tax-exempt status. The tax-exempt designation comes from the U.S. Department of Treasury, the IRS. So after you've filed your Articles of Incorporation with the state, you'll need to go to the IRS and request an IRS tax ID number, or EIN. And the EIN is an employer identification number issued by the Internal Revenue Service to nonprofit organizations. It's called employee employer identification number. Even if the nonprofit doesn't have any employees, it's still required. And it's what the organization uses when asked for proof of its nonprofit status. So once you've received your EIN, and you can call them on the phone and get it that way, I think you can actually, they'll do it immediately, or you can do it online. Then you would file with the IRS for your tax-exempt status. And that would be Form 1023, an application for recognition of exemption, which you can download from the IRS website. So when you do that form, it's important because when you're requesting the desired tax-exempt status, and you have to include the required documents, part of the evidence is from the state of Alaska. It's part of that Articles of Incorporation that you filed with the state of Alaska. So you're kind of doing the same, the state and federal. You kind of have to do them in an order, okay? One of the things about when you go to that State of Alaska Department of Community Economic Development Division of Banking, Services, and Corporations page, you can actually search for friends organizations that are currently in operation. And you can actually, they have a database of their corporations, and you can actually look at the documentation that other organizations have filed. It's publicly available. And so, you know, in addition to looking at the form that you have to fill out, it may be helpful to look and see how other friends organizations have completed those forms. Okay. Oh, let me go back. There's one thing I want to say about the IRS. I took a look at the form 2030, and I was like, holy moly, that form. It was a lot. I would say don't be intimidated by the form. It's really important. You have to answer every question and take your time. There's some checklists. They provide you some checklist things. Realize that is a form for a Red Cross, something that's like national. And then you have the Friends of the Library of my little community. So it's a form trying to incorporate all of these nonprofits. So take your time, work with a friend. If you know of an attorney, your friend's organization probably would be well served to ask them to maybe provide you some guidance in this, doing this. Maybe they'll do it pro bono. But don't be intimidated by that form. The state part is very straightforward. There's actually even an online training on how to become a nonprofit. The IRS has this little online tutorial you can take. You might want to even go through that training. I printed off the text of the training, and I found it to be helpful. So you might want to do that as well. Okay, publicize and recruit new members. You've got your 501c3 status. Do be advised that it can take up to 60 days from the time you submit to the time that you hear back from the IRS. They may contact you and say, wait a minute, we're still missing something. You might, which would make it even longer. There is a fee for applying for that nonprofit, so just think about that before you, and it's kind of a sliding scale based on 4 years average what you anticipate your organization is going to earn through fundraising. So you will have to come up with some money up front for that as well. So you've become a 501c3, now you're completely legit, and now you're going to want to recruit new members and start scheduling regular meetings and start promoting the word and getting people excited about your organization. So now I'm going to transition to our panelists. First, are there any questions? Okay, our library currently does not have a board. How important would you say that is to starting a friends group? I don't know, Jen. I know a lot of libraries are kind of moving away from library boards. If they are ran by a city or a town, it's just like one more level. I personally feel it's really important to have an advisory board, particularly if your library is facing a challenge. It's nice to have that group between you and the public that can kind of work on your behalf. And particularly when it comes to developing policies, I think it's really important to have an advisory board so that you get a lot of input from the community and you're making sure everybody's represented. But I know in really small communities, it's a challenge to constantly recruit people to serve in that role. And if you do have one in a small community, it can be even more difficult to recruit enough people to have a friends organization, right? Because you don't necessarily want the same group of people in wearing both hats. So, but I will let our panelists, maybe they can address it as well. I'm going to go ahead and start with Mary Rasmussen from the Anchorage Public Libraries. And Mary, take it away.
And I even remembered to unmute. Thank you. That was really a very good overview, and I always learn something. I was not around with our friends group when they incorporated, and I'm going to say, which Julie actually said also, is if you have an attorney who likes the library at all, which is how our original group started. It was an attorney who was a library supporter, and he really helped with the initial documents. And that's your number one clue of a good thing to do. But it doesn't have to be. And the one thing I'd say is keep it simple. Don't make it too complicated. If you're like ours, we have no employees. We're all volunteers. And the more complex you make it, the more hoops you have to continually jump through. So keep it simple when you're doing it. I'd like to say this is really difficult because libraries are public institutions, and everybody's and the feeling of, well, gee, if we give the library all this money, the municipality is just going to cut down what they give the library, so they're not going to get any further ahead. And that's always been a balancing act. And in Anchorage, we have 3 groups, and that's the Library Advisory Board, which we call a quasi-governmental because it's in municipal code, and they meet with they get, quote, give advice to the mayor and to the assembly, and their big thing is policy. And then we have our Anchorage Library Foundation, which is more the bricks and mortar, but does get into other things. But they do the big things. They try to build an endowment so libraries can stay open. You know, they do a bigger thing. And then comes Friends of the Library, which we always call ourselves the fun group. And we do fundraisers, yes, but we have a good time as people. And one of the things that our phrase is we should be the frosting on the cake. The funding should be part of the public sector, but what we give makes things better, makes things more delicious. We're the frosting on the cake. There are several things that we do. We do try to increase the visibility of the library, as you can see on the slide, and add to the library collection, support library activities and programs, and advocate for literacy and the library. And those are all things we do. The thing that comes up, and I would say I kind of almost cringe reading it in my list of goals, is advocate for literacy in the library, which of course is what we do, but because of our 501c3 status, you have to be a little careful of how you advocate. And in our case, we have chosen, you can advocate some proportion in actual advocacy, but we have chosen to do education versus advocacy, and that seems to have worked really well for us. The other thing is when you get started, to have partnerships. And like we Center for the Book, so when we do something, they will advertise it too. And when they do something, we'll send it out to our membership. The Rotary Club came in and did built a teen underground in the library, but they ran the money, not through Rotary, but through, in this case, it was the Library Foundation because it was a physical thing, but we have done things like that too. I find that since I said on here that we do $90,000 a year, I have to tell you, we're in big trouble this year. We have two major fundraisers, and one is we do book sales in first week in May and the first week in November. And this year we had to cancel both of those, and we do a Beyond the Stacks gala, 200 people sold out tickets event, and they garner big amounts of money in Anchorage, and therefore we're able to have money to do these other events. Something else we do yearly is the Jewish Temple here in Anchorage has a mitzvah mall, and they invite nonprofits, and so that's a chance for us to connect with other nonprofits. And is what we do is we take donations, and for that they get a card, and they can do it in somebody's name. And so they're giving a donation that goes to the library, but they're doing it in their friend's name, or they're giving something to their friend, and that works really well. One of the other things that we do is that $90,000 is almost the whole program budget of the Anchorage Public Library. And one of the things we do is also promote putting volunteers at these events. So if there's a program, somebody from Friends of the Library will go and introduce the speaker or introduce the program and say, it was funded by Friends of the Library. We tout our horn any place we can because got to always raise that money. And the other is author events, and we often get volunteers that go, and the volunteers help the authors sell their books, and then we get a kickback. So it's and this is all about board. Everybody knows what we're doing. I think that one of the things that Julie said is the communication being such a big thing, and I restate that that communicating in our case between the 3 boards that are out there, and we try to have the presidents get together quarterly so that we can discuss what our groups are doing, and that helps a lot. I'm gonna go for it later on. There might be questions, or I don't know how Julie has this set up, so I just encourage you to start simply and then build from there. It's fun.
Right. And I just want to say, Mary, you have an online form for people to become a member, and it works like a charm. It's really easy. Anybody can do it. You don't have to be in person. You can fill out the form.
That's one thing I will add, that membership mostly is just a donation because membership doesn't have a lot of perks. But one of the perks we did do was that we would have a preview night to our book sale, and members got for members only, and that grew our membership a great deal because people wanted first crack at our book sale. So that was our one perk we had, and we do have it. We work in tandem with the Anchorage Library Foundation, so our website is librarychampion.com. And that's also the foundation, so you click to whichever direction you're going, and it works out real well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now we're going to go to Homer and have Mary Lou Burton to talk about her program.
Yes. I've been on the Homer Public Library Board, the Friends of the Homer Library Board for 16 years, and most of that time I've served as treasurer. But every time I attend something like this, I learn something that I didn't know before. A lot of good advice. I think you could probably say that our Friends group started in the 1940s when the Homer Women's Group started the first community library. But when it really took off was in the late 70s. The library became a city department. Shortly after that, they replaced that tiny building that was built in the 1940s with a 3,500 square foot building, which seemed awfully big at the time. And the supporters who got that going also got interested in formalizing their status as a 501c3. Dedicated group, just like Julie said, hard workers, worker bees with a lot of connections in the community. We had a lot of energy and enthusiasm, and I was privileged to actually know one of the original ones, a woman who stayed on our board until about 5 years ago when she moved to Anchorage. We have our bylaws allow us to have I think it's a minimum of 7 and as many as 11 board members. We currently have 8. It includes the library director. He is a voting member of the board. We also have a city library advisory board, which is a quasi-governmental that reports to the city, primarily policy and budget issues. So our communication link between actually the city and the library advisory board and the Friends is the library director. So we have a working board. Probably too much, I think people would say, but I'll get back to that. The mission of the Friends from the very get-go has been to support library programs and services and to promote the use of the library, but not to supplant what the city provides. And in our case, what the city provides is the building, personnel, and it's a slippery slope, but books. It's always been part of the deal that we've had. And we do have a memorandum of understanding with the city. We do occasionally buy books, but we don't. We try to have our funds go towards things beyond what we think should be the city core services. We help organize and fund programs that driven by library staff, and most notably the summer reading program. We have a very vibrant and very popular summer reading program. And we have a child services librarian who, is pretty much the energy behind that. But then we also have our own programs, and as Mary points out, we have the frosting on the cake program. We've had, I think now, sponsored 4 big reads, bringing big read authors to Homer. We have candidate forums, author readings. We have an annual celebration of lifelong learning, and we have Bob the Bookmobile, which has been a great addition. We bought Bob from the Copper River Valley Library based in Glen Allen, and we use it for outreach. It goes to the schools, take it to the parks in the summer, and it's what we've been able to do with Bob has been curtailed definitely by the COVID-19, but we still we parked it in the library parking lot and twice a week all summer long, and still I think up through September. People came, both adults and kids, and we had a protocol set up so we could safely, and we gave books away through Bob. That, by the way, Bob was named. We had a contest, and by popular demand, I think by a 6-year-old, became Bob. So, this is all a lot of work. It doesn't come cheap, and we have the usual fundraisers, semi-annual book sales, plant sales, membership dues. Like Mary says, we've taken a big hit this year. We weren't able to do our celebration of lifelong learning. We didn't hold the spring book sale at all. We held a very modified version of the fall book sale last month and actually brought in a few $100s as opposed to the thousands we would normally bring in. But, it energized the community. People really like to have that access. And they love their library. So it was an opportunity to sort of pull people back. But we also, in recent years, have been more aggressive about fundraising and grants and going out to private and state and federal agencies for funding. And this started really when the library, when the community had a capital campaign starting in about 2000 to build a new library. That 3,500 square feet building was no longer large enough. We were bulging at the seams. And in the course of that, it's a very complicated process. And that group, the capital campaign group, which was a combination of people from the Friends, from the Library Advisory Board, and other people in the community, hired a part-time coordinator. And when the new library opened in 2006, that part-time coordinator became an employee of the Friends of the Homer Library. And we have had a part-time coordinator ever since. And it's been a game changer. Part of that person's job is to go out and get grants that pay for her salary. But it also, the coordinator has worked, they're located within the library. They work very closely with the library. She, it's always been a she so far, works very closely with the library director and library staff. So it is a Friends employee, but it is also, I think, become a vital extension of the library staffing, in effect. So they also, each coordinator, we've had 5, and each coordinator has brought her own passion for libraries to the job. And it's helped change the board's focus too. Like I say, I've been on this board for 16 years, and I've seen us grow as a result of having that other voice. I think I'm like Mary. I'm open to questions, but I agree. Keep it simple. Keep communication. That's vital. It really helps that we have that library director. I mean, he's a vital part, and we've always agreed that the library director has kind of veto power on anything that would make us go rogue. I'll turn it over.
Okay, thank you, Mary Lou. And you have both Anchorage Well, actually, all of you have dynamic youth services librarians. I think the world of all of them, Elizabeth and MJ and Claudia is just a phenomena. It's just great. Okay, so now we're going to go to the Friends of the Juneau Public Library. And so who wants to speak, Barbara or Carol? Oh, we can't hear you.
Barbara was going to start out.
Okay, great.
All right. This has been real interesting to hear about other people's experiences because Juneau's founding sort of echoes everybody else's. It was back in 1979 when Dale DeArmond, who was then our library director, called me. I had worked for them at one point and then was working for the university library. And Ann Simons, as some of you remember, who was with the Juneau Schools for a long time, and she said, I need to talk to you two, and we need to get a Friends of the Library started. So one of the first things that we did was to reach out to any other community organizations that could help us, because the goal was to get a new library started, because we were in the 1951 building that was really, really inadequate. So we went first to the Juneau League of Women Voters, who were willing to undertake a library study, the need for libraries. The way the league works is to study something in depth and then come out with a position on it. And we were careful to make sure that there were enough library supporters in the league to work on this. And they were invaluable in backing us in all of our efforts to get new libraries. It took us almost 30 years after that study to get our new library in the Valley, and in the course of that also to get a new library in Douglas. But the work the Friends did was invaluable. And listening to the organization information that people have shared, I will echo the fact that getting that initial document correct, having your statement of purpose hammered out is essential, and that you should revisit it every once in a while and make sure that it still is what you think your organization is doing. And another thing I would say is that the IRS filing can be complicated, and I think that in these days you have to expect that that's going to take longer. That's what I'm hearing from people, that getting a nonprofit status, 501c3, takes longer than it used to. So having the pro bono help from some attorney would be fantastic in that, or some really competent business person who has done nonprofit work of some kind. Being in Juneau over the years, we've had really some good volunteer advisory help. At one point, the fellow who was investing for the permanent fund came and told us how to make some investments that turned out very well for us. So in Juneau, we do not have an advisory board, and we have never really sought an advisory board. The Friends are sort of the de facto advisory board. The library director is a member, an ex officio member of the Friends board, and that has helped a lot. And he doesn't vote, but he really gives a lot of expertise in helping us to do what really works for the library. We do have our own endowment fund, which we came by as the remainder trust of the woman whose family owned the Juneau Telephone Company for years and years and years. And after her heirs inherited, she divided it between the public libraries, the university, and the Diocese of Juneau. So that was the core. It was about $400,000 when we got it. And it's invested by the city. It's in the city's mix of investments. So the closest we come to having a city advisory board is that the Friends have a seat on the board that governs that endowment fund, which is part of the city's investment. And that person applies to the city and is approved by the assembly to sit on it. And the board occasionally weighs in on issues with the library, and its mission pretty much echoes the Friends' mission, which is they don't buy the essential services of the library that the city should be funding. But over the years, they have bought computer equipment that we couldn't afford otherwise when we were getting on the internet for the first time. They have sponsored individual sub-endowments for purchase of memorial fund books and a memorial for people. And so it's a sort of a different kind of a balance, but it works. And I think it's largely because the library director sits on both the Friends Board and the Endowment Board, and can really, and have all the directors, I was one of them at one point, have been supportive of those boards. Other notes that I took here is looking for partnerships is a really good thing to do. One of the ones that has worked for us is the Association of for the Education of Young Children. They've been an ongoing partner with the library. They help to put on some of the events that we have. They bring volunteers. They use their database of many people to publicize those events. And we have gone to the community market and had booths there, the Christmas market, and many author events, which Carol knows a lot more about than I do because she's the one who put them on for many years. And other things that I can say is every once in a while go through all of your bylaws, go through your memo of understanding. We don't have a formal memo of understanding with the library, but your statement of purpose serves as that. Make sure it still is in alignment. The only conflicts I think we have ever had was with sort of the bookstore going rogue at one time, our famous, amazing bookstore. There was leadership out there that had somehow felt that the library administration was not on their side somehow, and we resolved that. It was difficult for a while, and we now have a very, very good relationship with the bookstore. They have permanent seat on the Friends, a representative there, and so we get the information about what it is that concerns them at any moment. And as the others have said, during the past few months, we have not, the bookstore has not done the business that they were doing. They had to they shut down completely, and I think it was about four months that they were shut down. But at the urging of our library director, Robert Barr, we applied for federal grants for the community grants and got them. So that paid for the back rent, so they did not lose their facility, and allowed them to make some upgrades for social distancing and screens around the checkout desk and electronic payments, so that they are now back in business on a limited basis, but still spinning gold out of old books, which it is truly amazing. I think a little kid gave us that name at some point. Oh, this is an amazing bookstore, and there's the name, and made a banner and put it up. So, and I too am. I'm not working, and I'm also not going to be on the Friends board here soon, once they found a replacement for the endowment board link. But I'm always willing for anybody to email me with any questions. So I'll turn it over to Carol, and she can talk about the programs that she did, if that's good with you.
Sure. Hi. I thank you all. I've learned from each of you. Barbara, even when she was my director, and I just learned some things right here. Thanks a lot. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as Barbara said, our main funding has come from the Amazing Bookstore. It's a group of, I need to change my camera here. It's a group all of volunteers, just incredible. So that the spitting gold is the way she put it, and that's exactly what happens. And So that's our main part of fundraising. We also have a Friends of the Library, which you see it here, website, and we have a Facebook page. So we're currently changing over from a donor view into wild apricots, and yeah. So if you're curious about that, I'm not very technical, but we're having it's a lot less expensive, and so we've gone with that. It fills our needs, and we will use it for becoming a member here. And so we use those two for advocacy also. So, yeah, Barbara was the director when I was working at the library as the program coordinator, which it was something I loved dearly. So I am so happy that we both rolled off in retirement into the board. We do support what the library would like to have, and Robert Barr, our director, helps us determine what is going on with the library, what kind of partnerships would make a good fit for them. Of course, things have changed with right now during our COVID thing, but a lot of the programs we have in the past that we've supported have been the summer reading program, the bookmark contest, anything to do with kids gets a lot of parents in the library also, and so that is a really wonderful connection to have in. And of course, we love the kids too, and as Barbara said, we work with NIAC, which is Education of Young Children, and we recently have connected with them through a grant to get an AmeriCorps volunteer to come in, and that is to be determined exactly, since we had put this together before the COVID, how she will be possibly working online with someone. We've also worked with the local theater. We, being a nonprofit, with the grants, we worked with the Institute of Museum and Libraries, and also the Science on the Screen grant. So we worked with a local theater. There's a small theater here that provided the connection to the movies, and then we provided a person to come speak on that topic. So that was really a wonderful connection. And actually the staff at the library put those two together. We just provided the grant ability to do so. Another thing was the StoryCorps, which was really wonderful through the Institution of Museum and Libraries. And it brought in the Native culture to talk and record their stories. Just a wonderful, and I don't know, maybe the StoryCorps will come around again. Look for it. It's just amazing. They train people to be the questioners, so that they can keep people along on track and get great stories from that. So we support the library, but not the core services. So just like other libraries, we support the programming of the library. We support the learning and the literacy. Yes, I think the education was a good way to put it, Mary. I think that's, trying to help help education for the children and the teens. We have a teen area at the library, and that is used pretty heavily, or it was when we were open all the time. We also have a lot of homelessness at the downtown area, and our library is used continually for that, for those people to be able to come inside.
So Carol, I'm going to just pop in here. It's 11:59, and I just want to be sure that we can answer any questions to anybody. I know people have to often scoot out, so Is it okay, if I interject here?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. I just thank you all for.
Okay. And before I do want everybody to know that I know a lot of your libraries are participating in the Books to Vote program that Carol's son, Pat Race, was the illustrator for. He designs the fantastic graphics for that program. So are there any questions for our panelists before we have to go? Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody coming. I thank all of our panelists. This was fantastic. I'm going to stop the recording so that we capture this meeting. And